Welcome to Rackets Biz, the only podcast that delivers data-driven insights into today's rackets industry. New clubs are opening consistently in the United States and all over the world. Some make it, some go out of business quickly. As an investor and facility operator, what is it that you need to know to create constant cash flow and consistent long-term ROI? Join me for today's episode. Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Dominique Lemperle. Today's guest is CEO of Racket Social, Patricio Misitrano. Patricio and I first met in Mar del Plata, Argentina, representing Team USA at the Senior Pan Am Padel Championships. For more than 20 years, Patricio has been at the center of racket sports growth, from paddle and pickleball to tennis and platform tennis. Today, he's the CEO of Racket Social with 3 locations in Atlanta, Houston, and Denver, and 1 more planned for Texas. He's also the CEO of Misitrano Consulting and has written the 2025 Q2 Padel Industry Report, which is a 64-page document. Today, we will talk about everything from macro trends to unit economics to operational pitfalls. Patricio, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Welcome. Tell us where you grew up and what was the first racket sport you played and what led you to become CEO of 2 companies.
Well, and sorry for interrupting, and thank you for having me, Dominique. I'm so excited and to be part of your first episode. And I grew up in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, in a big city, and playing tons of sports. I played, my first racket sport was tennis. My second racket sport was padel, and pickleball and platform tennis became much later when I moved to the US and decades later. And I don't think anyone played pickleball in Argentina in the 80s when I started playing tennis or padel. And I don't think there are any platform tennis. I'm pretty sure there are none in Buenos Aires. And the second part of your question, what led me to become the CEO of 2 companies? Actually, the title, I always say that is more for the people on the outside than for me. I really don't care about the title. And whatever I have to do, then regardless of the title, is what I have to do. So it's more for others. So in terms of the first one, the Racket Social Club, and because I needed someone to lead the managing of all the clubs, and you mentioned 3, 1 in Houston. Actually, we're opening 2 in Houston, in different parts of Houston, and 1 is an indoor facility with 5 paddle courts that will be opening in the next few weeks, definitely before the end of the year. And the second one is an outdoor facility with 2 pickle as well. And then the other company, of which I am the founder and CEO, is a consulting business. So I could give myself any title that I want. And like I said earlier, it's more about, and to the outside, and just so people, would understand, my position and my responsibility other than having a title. And if you were to me, I would have no title. And I usually introduce myself as Patricio, because and without any titles or even my last name, I drop my last name sometimes, because if I pronounce my first name and my last name, people, it's too much. And there are not that many Patricios in the rackets world. There are some, but that's usually how I introduce myself.
Got it. Well, thank you for that. We both have a tennis background, but I noticed all your facilities that you're launching have paddle and pickle, no tennis. What's the reasoning behind that?
And the main reason is real estate. So if you think about how much space you need to have 1 tennis court, 1 single tennis court is 120 by 60. If you have 2 tennis courts, maybe you can share the space in between them on the side. So still you need 120, from back fence to back fence. But that's really the reason in real estate. And I don't know many companies that are actually building tennis courts these days. And I anticipate that that's going to be probably the case for a while. And I don't think that, many people are thinking about, let's, open a club or let's, add tennis courts to our facilities. They're thinking about racket sports that that don't take so much space. And at the same time, you can, same space, you can have up to 16 pickleball players or perhaps, 12 paddle players instead of 4 tennis players. I think most clubs, whether they are for profit or not for profit, they are thinking in those terms. With the space that I have, how many people I can provide services to, and that's really the reason why there's no tennis at the clubs that we opened recently.
Yes, that makes sense. Every facility that I see almost opening daily these days, pickle, paddle, or pickle as a gateway to paddle. Is that the reason why you chose pickle at your facility as well, to provide an easy entry for paddle in the United States?
Yeah, there are in all the facilities will have paddle. That's for sure. So that's the main sport that we want to feature in all the clubs. Then pickleball is also a function of the space as well. And sometimes you're limited by column spacing if it's an indoor facility, and even in an outdoor facility, you're limited by the space that you have and the orientation. And when you think about the orientation of tennis courts or the orientation of paddle courts, and when you toss the ball and then you look up into the sky, you don't want to be looking into the sun. And paddle, there are tons of lobs, and well, at least there should be a lot of lobs in play. So the orientation sometimes prevents you from adding 2 more courts, and you're better off having pickleball courts sometimes. And I think that having pickleball courts gives you the opportunity to not having to explain what the sport is about, because most people know, or at least have heard about pickleball. And very few, even though my Instagram feed and my Google feed, it's all full of paddle and pickleball, most people don't know paddle yet. And that's changing a little bit, but when you add pickleball to your facility, you really don't need to explain what the sport is about. And with paddle, even the name, people have to learn how to pronounce it. Some still pronounce it padel instead of paddle. But it's still growing, and for a while it will be the same. So having pickleball at your facility gives you the opportunity to have a ton of people that already will walk in, will come, will play pickle, and then maybe will then transition or do both.
Are you happy right now with how Racket Social is performing overall as a CEO? Tell us a little bit about your success so far with Racket Social.
Yeah, two of the clubs open early in the summer. One, I think it was towards the end of May, and the other one towards the end of June. The other two, actually, the two in Texas, in Houston, and one is almost 100% completed, the outdoor facility. The other one is going to be completed in the next few weeks. So I'm still very new because I started in less than 2 months ago. And one of the first things that I did is, I sort of restructure pricing and restructure membership benefits. And because we have a hybrid model that allows for members and non-members to come and play. So far, based on the timing of when I came in, and given the fact that in a lot of areas, paddle is still very seasonal, and I'll explain, for example, in Florida, most people in the summer, or Atlanta, Florida, Atlanta, when it gets really hot in the summer, they don't like to play outdoors so much because it's hot, and people tend to travel some in the summer. Then in the Denver area, for example, in the summer, people cannot wait to be outside, and we have an indoor facility in Denver. So I think that after one full year of having the clubs open, then we'll be able to see how they're working in terms of seasonality or not. But usually in the summer, a lot of the clubs tend to produce a little bit less than in the fall and in the winter time.
Yeah, of course. And let's talk about macro trends across the United States. There are, according to your report, the Q2 2025 Padel Report, there are an estimated 113,000 Padel players in the US spread across 688 courts. If you compare that to Spain, Spain has 17,000 courts and 5.5 million players, and Argentina 7,000 courts and 2.1 million players. Here you can find Padel in about 30 US states, so it's entering its early growth phase, with more courts being built in the last 2 years than in the previous 10 combined. That is a huge number that investors and facility owners should be aware of. Which drivers do you think? Real estate, player demand, or capital influx will be most important to generate more growth in the United States?
I think that a combination of all the factors that you mentioned, and I think it has to be the right time for the sport to grow, and now it is the right time. And the numbers that I published in my report, 688 courts, that was until June 15. Now there's almost, because I have a dashboard that I put together. I haven't shown it to anyone, but soon I will publish that as well, which is a dashboard that shows all the data, and not into a report format, but just a dashboard really. And as of today, there's almost 850 courts, and the numbers, the 688 was in June 15th. So it continues to grow more and more. So the prior 18 months until the end of Q2, the year-over-year growth was 51%. If you take into account the growth of 2025 compared to 2024, we're doubling the number of courts. So that's pretty impressive. And the 113 players that I estimated, and I think they're actually more than that number, but I wasn't comfortable, throwing out a number that was much bigger than that. And because there's a ton of people that play once a year, sort of like when someone says, okay, I'm a golfer, what does that mean? Maybe they play once a year and they say I'm a golfer. So I think with Padel, with so many events now that are happening, and I'm not talking about the ones that play in a league, play in tournaments, once or twice a month, or have, a weekly game, or even more than that. I'm talking about the ones that play once a year or twice a year. That number could be 250,000 by itself. And I think it's probably along those numbers, but I wasn't comfortable. And I used two different, systems to come up with a number, and both of them gave me a very similar number. So that's why I was comfortable, the 112,000 and change of players. And now in terms of, capital coming into the space, I think there's a ton of money that is coming in. And I really hope that they don't really focus on the bottom line, and they don't look at pro forma, and they don't look at the financials alone. Because if you forget about the community, about the programs, about creating the grassroots play, and then it's probably not gonna work, and those clubs are not gonna be successful. I think if you take care of the players first, the community, then you will have the business being successful.
Yes. Building a sense of belonging and a strong community will be so important for every club. So that's one thing that facility owners need to be aware of when they hire their director of Padel or their director of Rackets. Can that person create community and belonging for the players? So that's one thing investors and potential facility owners can take away from this, from our conversation here so far. Let's talk about capital efficiency. Based on your report, Padel pricing seems highly localized and very driven by market-specific factors. The median court fee is about $100 an hour for indoor courts, with the lowest peak rate being about $40 an hour in Ohio and Texas, with a handful of outliers in New York charging $240 to $320 an hour. What is the current median build-out cost per court, and how is that shifting regionally?
And the median is, and it depends a little bit on the side work. So I'm not gonna go into side work because that could be a factor that completely changes. So I'm just gonna stay and focus on the actual court itself. And I've heard up to $100,000 per court, so I'm not going to use those. Those are the kind of the outliers. I think the courts between $40,000 to $50,000 per court is the number that investors should be looking at, or clubs should be looking at when they're planning and they're budgeting their courts. And it depends on a number of things. Number one, how many are you going to install? I'll give you an example. If you're installing 3 courts, then depending on the company, sometimes you need 1 or 2 containers. There are some companies that are able to fit 3 paddle courts into 1 container, and some other companies only can fit 2. So that is going to increase shipping charges, whether it's because they're coming directly from overseas or because they need 2 trucks to transport those courts. And so that is going to affect a little bit the number, then the type of courts that you're installing, and even the turf itself. There could be a difference of $3,000 per court. So when you start adding all these different factors and the type of court itself, whether it's a full panoramic, which means no columns, or it has 4 columns, in each corner, or it has more columns in between the glass panels. So that is going to change a little bit. That's why I said between 40 to 50. It could be a little bit less than 40, a little bit less than 40 and a little bit more than 50, but I like to use those numbers just to be, in the ballpark. And then the other portion, like I mentioned earlier, the side work. If you're installing over a parking lot, if you're installing over a tennis court, or if you're installing over a piece of turf and just grass, then the change in price is going to be significant. And tennis court obviously is going to be the cheapest one, and then you might need to do some drainage if whether it's on a tennis court or on a parking lot. So those are all the different factors that are going to affect the bottom line. But if you want to use 40 to 50 for the court itself, you're probably going to be in the ballpark.
So that's what investors and facility owners should generally plan for. Medium build-out cost between 40 and 50. Okay.
Yeah.
And let's talk about EBITDA, operating profit. For investors who want multi-court facilities, what EBITDA numbers, meaning earnings before interest, taxes, and non-cash charges, margins, are you seeing from the top performing clubs?
So to answer that question, I would have to see their financials. I don't have access to the financials of all the clubs. I only have access to some of the clients and the folks that I've worked with prior as a consultant, and then my current club. But it's very hard because that is so specific to each area. So the EBITDA that you're going to get at an indoor facility is different than you're going to get at an outdoor facility. The number of courts, whether the club offers membership or not, if there is food and beverage as part of the services and the revenue. So that is going to be very, very specific to each location and to each club and the setup of the facility.
But indoor is the way to go, isn't it?
I think so. And this is in many, and it's not because in the for example in the Northeast or the Midwest it gets really, or even in like areas like Denver, it gets really cold in the winter, and for a number of reasons indoor play helps. One of them, for example, in South Florida or parts of Texas too, it gets really hot, so people don't want to play when it's too hot. And
Right.
the sun is a huge factor as well. When you play indoors, you don't need to worry about that. And then you have rain, you have wind, and even when it doesn't rain, but it's about to rain, a lot of people don't make plans to play paddle if it might rain. And then in other cases, after it stopped raining, you may not make plans because you think that the courts are wet, or they might be wet. So that number could be, a 25 to a 30+% of lost revenue just because of rain, it's too hot, or it might rain, or it might be too windy, and you lose a lot of revenue. When you can plan, and everyone can plan, not only the facility and the club owners, but also the players, then your revenue is not going to fluctuate as much, and you can always offer a good service. And you know that if you have a game on a specific day at a specific time, it's not going to get suspended because it's either too cold, or because you run out of light, or it's too hot, or it rained.
Would agree with that. And also for your teaching pros, they're going to be very happy that they can teach their lessons every day, rain or shine.
Yeah, absolutely. It helps you also with your staff to give them more stability in terms of their revenue. And I'm going to add one more thing, and it's not really a thing much in the US. I don't know, for some reason I think it's mostly in parts of England that people are complaining about the noise that paddle makes. And I come from Argentina, and I never heard that people were complaining about how much noise there is on a paddle court. And my brother has a court that is probably 250 feet from his house. And I asked him, so does it bother you? And like, no, and there's a house right next to the courts. So when you go indoors, then that's out of the question. No one can hear the bounce of the ball on the glass, or when you hit it, if the courts are inside of the building.
Right. So indoor is the way to go.
Yeah, I think so.
Let's talk about financing models. Are you noticing a trend toward private equity, franchising, or club member financing for new builds right now?
So new builds, I see a lot of private equity, small offices coming into play, and no institutional investors other than some funds that actually are investing, and then there's some private investors that are investing as well, and which is very interesting. And as far as I know, there's only 2 companies that are offering franchises, and that will probably grow as well, and with time. But more than anything, I see one owner or one group owning one club. There are some that are looking to expand. Racket Social Club is one of them that has locations in multiple locations and in different states. But for the most part, out of the 200 plus clubs, the majority are just one-off.
The majority are one-off.
Yeah.
Can you explain that a little more?
Yeah, one-off is just one club that only has one location. Then you have some that have multiple locations, but the majority of the clubs that are right now open with paddle courts in their facilities, it's just only one. They don't have more than one location. I can probably think of maybe 10, if so, that have more than one location. So it's 5% of the club. There's more than 200 facilities. So if you think about it, I would have to count, but top of my head, I can think of maybe around 10 that have multiple locations.
Which includes Racket Social.
Yeah. Racket Social being one of them.
Got it. So looking at the report inside of the United States, there's some markets that are very saturated, like Florida, for example. So if you're an investor and you're looking at US metro areas to potentially build, do you go to Florida, where Miami, for example, has a lot of players, or do you go to an area that doesn't have a lot of players yet and not a lot of clubs, and you hope that it's eventually going to get there. What do you do if you're an investor?
Very good question. So the location is key, and when I say location, you have to have, I think, two factors that are really important. One is how many people are within 10 miles, 5 miles, 3 miles, 15 miles, and sometimes you can even think about the driving distance, and not in terms of the driving time, not the distance alone, because you could be 10 miles from a club, but then it takes you 45 minutes. So you have to think about the area, how many people are within, a driving distance, and 30 minutes, depending where, it's a lot of time. And in some other areas, it is not. I'll give you an example. If you're the first one to a market, 30 minutes, it doesn't matter. Everyone will go there. Mm-hmm. And I remember when Padel House opened up, I would drive more than an hour because that was the only place where I could play. But now, I wouldn't drive more than an hour to go play Padel. So at some point, like in Miami, people probably drive 10 to 15 minutes to go play. But in other areas, without any issue, people drive 30 minutes. So when you go into an area where there are tons of clubs, and you have to be also aware of how many potential players are in that area, and then where the demographics tell you, how much money they make, household income. It's another big number that I look at, because you want to make sure that the rates that you're charging, people can actually pay for them. So yeah. The location, how many people live within a specific, radius, driving distance more than, driving time more than driving distance, and then what the household income is. Now, if you do all the things well and you're the first one in an area, and it could be amazing. Even if you're the second one, it could be even better, because all the hard work was done by the first club that opened up, and then you're coming in and already there's some sort of community. And if they open up and they did a really good job, they're probably going to keep most of those players. But people like to, maybe if it's a little bit closer to their house, and then you might get them. But being second in the market, being third in the market is not always wrong. In some cases, it's actually a really good thing. And even if you're the first one and then a second one comes, it's actually good, because they're going to help you build the community as well. And you might be able to do interclubs, to do, challenges with that club, and more people are going to talk about the sport. And that, helps everyone. I don't see for a while, competition, so unless someone opens right next to you, which I doubt that many will, but someone opening a club in their vicinity, it still helps you more than hurts you.
I see. So what you're describing sounds very familiar. I was in Sarasota, Florida for a little while, and there was one indoor Padel facility, and there were a few players who played all the time. They were absolutely hooked. And that facility did not have pickleball, just 4 paddle courts. And for someone like me who was addicted, it was great to get court time. I could basically play whenever I wanted. But the facility owner had to adjust her hours, her operational hours, because she noticed that certain people only play late at night, mostly after work. And Sarasota was a tennis town, or is a tennis town. And some tennis players went and tried it. But it's, as we know, tennis players are very picky on what they like. So are pickleball players. So it takes a bit to convert the masses into Padel players. What do you think it's going to take to convert the masses into Padel fans?
Yeah, I think that, very few who try it say, I don't like this. If you ask me, I don't know anyone who said, oh, this is not for me. And people like it right away. Some, play all the time right after they try it, and some play every once in a while. And some others, have other things going on. Like you said, someone who plays tennis or pickleball, they already have their tennis and pickleball friends. So you have to, sort of make new Padel friends. or some of your tennis or pickleball friends to come over. Or it could be someone who never plays tennis or pickleball, because that's one of the nice things about padel, and similar to pickleball, you do not need to have any racket experience in order to go and pretty much play right off the bat. The learning curve is almost non-existent. And when people say that, oh, but I don't know how to play with the walls and I don't know how to use the glass, someone at that level who is not that comfortable using the glass will most likely play with someone the same level. And
Right.
in order for someone to get the ball past your opponent into the glass, it's not that easy. So there's going to be a lot of rallying without using the glass. And the paddles are very easy to play with. They have no strings, and I think it's very easy to start playing the sport. So you can convert some, and someone that plays once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month, and then a little bit at a time, you will get more. And you can also get players who are squash players who have never played. So focusing only on tennis or pickleball players, I think it limits the potential pie of players that you can pick from. I would think that anyone who wants to be active and could actually play padel, similar to pickleball in that regard.
I agree. It's a great social avenue and a way to make new friends, which leads me to our next question. If you open Racket Social, for example, from F&B to pro shops to events, which non-court revenue streams are moving the needle the most? What have you noticed at your own clubs and in the industry?
And it depends, because not all the facilities have food and beverage. But if you do have food and beverage, you should be making significant revenue from food and beverage. If you have a liquor license, you should have significant revenue coming from alcohol sales. If you do not, then you're not going to have a ton of revenue from a snack bar. But if you have a snack bar, now let me rephrase that. If you have a snack bar, you should have significant revenue coming from there. If you do not have it, then you won't. If you only sell snacks, that's not having a snack bar. What I mean by a snack bar is a place where you can have a sandwich, you can have some sort of hot meal. Then the other revenue stream that it should be significant, that is non-court related, is actually membership. And the membership should move the needle, definitely. The key to having revenue, significant revenue coming from membership, is you have to create benefits that actually are benefits. I see clubs left and right saying, oh, you get a 10% discount in the shop, a 10% discount in courts, a 10%, 15%. That's not enough. Because a lot of people will say, I don't need to commit to paying you a fee. That's not a significant revenue for me. So I'm happy to come and play and pay whenever I come. So they need to be benefits tied to that membership, and then you're going to have good membership revenue. Then in the shop, unless you have a super established brand, and I can think of only one in the US that has at least on the padel side, that has a significant brand that people will say, oh, I want to wear a hoodie or a shirt or a hat that has that brand. For right now, and I could think of Reserve being the one that head and shoulders is above the rest. And other than that, I don't think there's significant revenue coming from the pro shop. I see it more as a service. Can you make money? Yeah, sure. But I think that the effort should be put somewhere else, not so much in the retail. I see the retail a little bit more as a service. You could make money, but I think the investment in the shop could be significant in order to really move the needle. And you have to really know what you're doing. You have to have a lot of some key people in managing that shop. And unfortunately, these days there's a lot of companies from outside of the US that are selling directly to consumer. That hurts all the clubs. And so yeah, those would be the two areas outside of the court. One being food and beverage, and if you have a liquor license, and then membership.
What
about events? Should you run lots and lots of tournaments in there constantly, or be a little bit more careful about events?
No, events I think is a great revenue source. I would consider that court revenue because you're using the courts. But definitely there are different types of events. So you could have social events, which I think all the clubs should use, and that as a way to increase member satisfaction or player satisfaction. Then the other one is tournaments, 1-day tournaments or 4-hour tournaments. I call them flash tournaments because they are short. The multi-day events I think are more difficult to create and mass that could spend 2 days and playing a tournament and not doing anything else and being available. And then private events is the other private events I'm talking about, whether it's a company that comes and rents a space, or it's a birthday party, or it's an anniversary, and those types of events are also good source of revenue. But I would consider those on-court revenue.
Understand. So to sum it up, you want to have a snack bar, definitely a liquor license, and you want to have quick, exciting events and provide value with your membership. Is that what you would recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. The liquor license is tricky, and the snack bar also, you have to know what you're doing. If you just say, I'm gonna have a snack bar, and then you don't know how to manage it, then you're gonna be in trouble. And the liquor license also, you have to think about how you're gonna manage the bar. Are you gonna have a bartender, and are you gonna have specific hours of operation? There's liability that comes into play when you're selling alcohol. So that requires more training, more permits. And so I'm not saying you have to do it, but it needs to be a conscious decision that you're gonna do it. And I think it adds to the value of the club if you're able to sell alcohol. And a lot of people like to have a beer or whatever they drink after they play, and I think that adds to the social aspect of a club. But I know there's some people that say we want to be alcohol free, and that's up to them. But if you're thinking that you're gonna go that route, it's not just let's apply for a license. You have to think about everything that goes around having a liquor license. And I'm not an expert, and it's different in every municipality or city, but you're probably going to have to offer food as well. You can't just sell alcohol without food. I think that is in most places the case. So you have to think about that part as well.
Got it. So Racket Social offers both liquor and food?
For right now, we do not. It's in the works, and we haven't had the permits yet. But we're thinking about, actually we're in the process of, applying for a liquor license, not in all the locations, but at least in 2 of them.
Okay. So you're definitely going to go that way. I think that's a great idea.
I think it adds value to the club, but you have to be prepared from the staff to the space, and to liability, to insurance. You have to. It's not that simple to say, oh, let's have a bar, let's apply for a license. You have to think about all the other factors.
Sure. And that leads me to our next topic of discussion, which is technology and data. So the operators using data analytics or AI tools, how should they optimize scheduling, retention, and pricing using those tools, and which tools do you recommend?
Very good question. And I'm going to tell you what I would like to do. No one has done it yet, but at some point I would like, for a club, if we can do it at a Racket Social Club, maybe we will. But when you buy an airline ticket or a hotel room or Uber, how the price changes based on availability. I would like for a club to say, look, this is the rate right now. And so that in terms of pricing, and I don't know, I'm sure there's someone who can do it. I haven't found them yet, but in terms of lowering the price or increasing the price based on demand, I think that whoever does that first will be leading the industry. And whether it's pickleball or paddle, maybe someone is doing it, but I don't know anyone. And so the other one is the analytics and analyzing data. And it's so important to know, for example, how many players came to play once and then they never came back. So what are you doing with those people? Are you communicating, and are you calling them? Are you sending them a text message? Are you contacting them via email? So what happens if they come twice? So you have to have it's sort of like a sales funnel. Once the person enters the funnel, what are the actions that you're going to take? And to be, to put it in terms that, we can all understand, and, they come once, then what actions are you going to take? Okay, so they don't respond to that. What actions are you going to take? So then, are you going to offer them discounts? Are you going to telling them about events? Are you going to telling them about an open place? Are you going to telling them to come and rent the court? Are you going to tell them to take a lesson? And when do you stop? When for the folks that come all the time, what are you going to do with those as well? So analyzing all that data is so important. Then the data from your website, the data from your emails, from open rates to clicking rates, what works best, to send the emails early in the morning, middle of the day, late at night, weekends, weekdays. The more information you have, it could get more complicated. But we have dashboards that I didn't put together, but I know what I like to see. And then we have a marketing team and a data team that puts all of these things together, and then we can see all the numbers on the screen and then analyze from week to week, day to day, month to month, and so on, and then see what works. And if you cannot track all this information, then you're guessing. You're making decisions based on what you think is happening, and you might be right, or most likely you're not gonna be right. But and having data and hard data and then analyzing the data, I think is like so important. Or work in the guessing game, and I don't want to be in the guessing game.
Yes. Nobody wants to be in that game.
Yeah.
So yeah, what you mentioned is extremely important. I think it's crucial for the director of rackets, the front desk, the manager of the facility to create community and belonging, like we mentioned earlier, to help grow the membership and the repeat customers, so it doesn't turn into bowling. So it's once a year I go bowling. We don't want that for those facilities, right? So very good point you just made. And data is so important to help us. We get the name, the number. Let's follow up with these people and grow our membership. All right, I have one more question for you. Future outlook. If you had to forecast one surprising industry shift by Q4 2026, what would it be?
And for Q4, I don't know if it's going to be a shift, but it's going to be something that is going to accelerate. So from the data that I had collected until Q2 of this year, and the data that I see now, I see an increase in more indoor facilities. So most of the clubs that are opening up are indoors. They're not outdoor clubs. So I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was around 10% of all the paddle courts were indoor courts. Now it's over 42. And that increase, that 3%, was only in the last 3 months, which is huge. So if anything, I see an acceleration of that trend and going more indoors. And if you have the space and you can have indoors and outdoors, it's okay. But you have to make sure that you're not competing with yourself, because building the indoor courts is more expensive. And if you, let's say, I'm going to use a random number. I'm going to use, 8. So you have 4 indoor courts and 4 outdoor courts. So maybe when the day is not too hot and it doesn't rain, people like to play outside, but they would have played inside. So basically, by having a lot of courts when maybe you didn't need that many, and you're competing, the outdoor courts are competing with the indoor courts. So if you start with just those 4 indoor courts, then someone wants to play, even if it's nice outside, they're going to play indoors because they might not have another option if they want to go to your club. But if you install 8 courts and you didn't need all eight at once, then you're competing with yourself and you spend a lot of extra money that you didn't need to. Now you install those 4 indoor courts and then you figure out like, okay, and these are not enough, and I have to turn people away. Then you can do the outdoor courts. Then it makes sense.
Sure. So indoor courts is the way to go. Again, we see that. So this is a question I'm going to ask you and every other guest on this podcast, because we're here for our investors and future facility owners. From your 20 years of experience in the rackets industry, if you could do it all over again, start your first facility, what are some of the lessons learned? And what would you recommend for first timers going into this business, running their own facility? What do they need to know so they do not go bankrupt after 1 year?
Very good question. And I think that the very first thing is, I need to think about the vision of my business. What do I want out of this, business? Because building if it's paddle only or paddle and pickleball, but it's the same. So what type of business, am I in, and who is my customer? So you have to define that part from the get-go, and then based on that, then you are gonna make some decisions. And the other part is, and I know some may agree with me, but that's okay. And I don't think you need to overspend at the very beginning. And you have to do whatever, the structure of the building or the structure of the facility, it needs to be set up for future growth. But you don't need to overspend on a lot of things that people will still come if you didn't have them. So you can always, spend on other things that you might think that they are super nice, that you must have them later on if they can be added on. And I'm not saying, for example, I wish I had a full kitchen and a full bar. Well, if you're thinking that that's the type of club that you're going to be, well, leave things set up in a way that you can do that in the near future. And I'm talking more along the lines of, overspending in furniture, overspending in, I don't know, signage. When you can spend $100,000 in signage, or you can spend $5,000 in signage, outside the club, and you put your logo over the door. So those are the things that might hurt you, because it's so hard to get that money back. And every time that you're spending money, you should think about, what added value I'm bringing in, and do I really need this? And lighting could be one of them. You have to have good lighting, but at some point you're like, okay, is this enough, or do I need to spend double this amount? You could always overspend in lighting, for example. But is that gonna, move the needle in terms of, are more people gonna come and are gonna say like, I only play at this place because, I have the lights, I like the lights that they have, or they're still gonna come regardless because they like the community, they like the players, they like the coaches, they like the front desk people. So overspending in things you don't need, I would say it needs to be the second part. First is, what business am I in? What is my vision for the club, for the business? And the other one, not overspending.
That's a great point you made. So make sure you build your community first. You have exciting events. You make it fun for people to want to go there, and make sure you're set up for success before you overspend.
Yeah.
That sounds absolutely.
You said it better than me.
No, you set it up. So thank you, Patricio. How can potential investors or facility owners get in touch with you if they want your advice?
And well, they can contact me on LinkedIn. I also have a website. My website is called misitranoconsulting.com, and there's a contact button, and I can get in touch with them. And on LinkedIn, you can find me by my first name, last name. I don't think anyone else has actually my last name, and other than my brothers, my dad, my mom, and my kids, and my wife. But yeah, Patricio Misitrano on LinkedIn or misitranoconsulting.com on the internet.
Thank you so much for your time. Is there anything else you would like everyone to know before we call it a day?
Yes, they should keep listening to your podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Patricio, thanks for your time. And it was an honor having you as my first guest.
Well, thank you so much, Dominique. And I'm sure next time we see each other, maybe we can play some paddle.
I would love to. Would love to. Hopefully again for Team USA. Here we go.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Thanks again. Have a great day. Don't miss the next episode and subscribe to Rackets Biz on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Like us on LinkedIn and Instagram. See you next week.